Good morning, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at property address 788 Bridge Street here in Lafayette. We are located, I describe everything as if you're standing in the street, in this case standing on Bridge Street facing the front door. We are on the left side of the home, also the same side of the house as the gravel driveway and concrete driveway we're on, I suppose. We have a 3-inch ABS clean out. Can't miss the thing. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water is running. We are zeroed out. Off we go. We go into some standing water here right out of the gate. And we're going over like what looks like a pipe edge right there. The line might be swapping over. There we go. That's what I was thinking. Just made a transition there. Yeah, we'll take a better look at that on the way out. It's so shallow I can actually hear the camera going through right through the ground. So we swapped over what looks like transite concrete. I had to bring an umbrella over here to shade my screen. I had such a nasty light glare. Definitely transite concrete is what we're in now. Transite's a little bit different. It's 4-inch diameter. The difference between transite and standard aggregate concrete is rather than having aggregate rock in the mix, they put asbestos fibers in it. It's got that scary asbestos word, but generally speaking, the reason I like transite more than concrete, and they have some similar issues with susceptibility to things like roots, but transite as it ages remains smooth, whereas regular aggregate concrete becomes extremely rough over time. That roughness can lead to blockages, where transite does not have that same problem. They both wear out like anything. The other plus side of transite, it's got longer pipe sections. So there's less pipe joints, and the joints are generally fern coated. They have rubber seals around them rather than using grout. So the joints generally hold up better. But you know, either way, it's an old pipe product. We're going to take a better look at this on the way out. Once the line is drained, give it a better look over. We did have some settling issues at the beginning of the line. We'll take a close look at that. We also had a tie-in come in there. Right as we dropped in, about 2 feet into the line, there was a connection that came into the pipe. So we'll try and figure all that stuff out as we come back in here. All right, located the camera head successfully. The line does a dead straight shot, and this thing barely gets into the road. The main lateral is like a foot off the edge of the driveway. So almost 100% of this sewer line is under just gravel and dirt. That is an amazing setup, especially for a line that's on the older end. And it's only 3 foot 9 inches deep at the main lateral. Incredibly shallow sewer line too. These are all things that are really nice when it comes time to do repairs. Anyway, as we come back here, we'll take a good look at everything. And right now my camera's upside down. I apologize. I've got my non-auto leveler. My auto leveling cameras are getting fixed right now. So right now we're upside down. So the joints we've gone past thus far are closed off, and that's the first thing that wears out with concrete in general typically. Whether we're talking transite or aggregate, the joints are usually what start failing first. Now what occurs once that starts to happen is you get it can lead to anyway, is hydro erosion. When the joint opens up to the ground, can start allowing dirt to flow into the sewer line, which can lead to hydro erosion. Now, bear with me a second here. We're going to push back out. All right, so if you take a look at that joint right there, by and large, clean and dry. Fairly similar occurrence there. Pretty dry, clean looking joint. As we come back in here closer to the house though, I'm mostly pointing this out so you can see the contrast. So that's what a by and large, sealed up joint looks like. When you get back in here closer, you're going to see the difference between a joint that is sealed and one that is starting to become compromised and open to the ground. So you can see how you get a dark ring around that one. And then we have another one right here. And what that is an indication of is that moisture is weeping through those joints. So when a joint is still fairly sealed up, you know, these are not gaping wide open pipe joints, but they are starting to take on moisture. The groundwater is seeping into them, and what that can cause over time is slow but sure settling. There's no settling there at this point in time. However, the joints, from a technical standpoint, the joint is not a closed off joint any longer. That one there may have a little bit of dirt starting to come through it. You got a little nubby thing sticking out of the pipe joint there. There's not a lot of it. That's what makes it harder to discern as to whether or not that's dirt or simply just a little bit of debris. And then we have this tie-in here, which I'm trying to understand what that is for there. And it could be a storm system connection. This is an old enough house and old enough sewer line that could be a tie-in for a storm system. I guess it's possible it could be a clean out access as well for some odd reason. I'm not sure why that would have been put in there, but all right, and then right here, if you look at the top of the pipe, you have a bunch of gunk sticking to the top of the pipe, a big layer of it hanging down there. What that tells me is this has caused a blockage before, this location right here. You have a combination of it's an offset and some standing water. And that debris right there is telling the story. That's caused a blockage. The only way that debris hits the top of the pipe in that fashion is by a blockage occurring. The line fills up. It may not have led to a full-on backup, although it's a harder one to tell because the pipe is updated. If this was updated, you know, this ABS anyway was updated after the fact, after that occurred, you're not necessarily going to see evidence of that backup going all the way back into the house. You got two separate lines that come into here. It's kind of an interesting setup. Right as you drop in, it's kind of hard to see. Just before we get to the bottom of this clean out standpipe, there's a tie-in right here. Now it looks like it's for the bathroom, just through the wall, as far as I can tell. Although I was running the kitchen sink by and large for the most part. At one point I did flush the toilet. But you've got water that routes through that pipe right there just before you get to the bottom of this. And then you've also got something. This spot right here is what allows us to go back into the crawl space area. I'm not sure why they have it split that way. I'm going to run some water in the bathroom just to the wall to see if they're separated. You know, you've got part of the house routing through one portion, the other part of the house coming through this. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out... Oh, here we go. Nope, I figured it out now. So right now, I've got the bathroom sink running. So you've got that different parts of the house route to different parts of the sewer line. So what's funny is that the bathroom comes into this deepest part of the line, but it's the closest, and the sink that's the furthest thing away comes into the shallowest part of the lines. It's kind of backwards from what you would think, but either way, water's getting to where it needs to go here, it looks like. It's just kind of backwards from what I would typically think you'd do with it. So anyway, line looks good going back to the foundation wall here. There's no settling issues. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push out and I'll locate this joint here. Here's my 2 cents on this though. When you're talking a line that's of this age, we've already got joints that are weeping moisture in. It's a combination of things. It's an old sewer line. It's nearing the end of its lifespan. You've already got 2 joints that are starting to take on moisture. When you combine that with the fact that this thing is only 3 foot 9 inches deep at its deepest point, and nearly 100% of the line is under just gravel and dirt at very shallow depths, lines this age, I generally don't recommend spot repairs on. It makes far more sense. If you're going to come out here and start digging holes, you might as well just take it all the way to the main connection. And in this case, because the main is so darn close to the street edge, this is one of those where you may very well be able to actually update and connect to the main without even cracking into the road. You'd have to run that past a repair guy, but when you're only a foot or so into the road like that, at depths like that, sometimes they can merely tunnel under the street a foot or so without having to cut into the asphalt. So that's my 2 cents on it. And the other thing you run into when you start beating up the ground and exposing piping that's been buried this long, especially piping that's already got some joints that are becoming exposed to the ground, what you can end up with is jarring pipe and causing other parts of the line to settle and shift. And it just, to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to spot repair this thing at this point. I mean, obviously, as it relates to just purely flow, this right here is your flow obstruction, and you can see that it's caused a blockage before. That debris right there is blockage evidence. So, I mean, that's kind of how I'm feeling about that. If you're going to do any digging here, you might as well just take it all the way. I mean, for an excavator to come out here and dig that trench out to the street edge at depths like that under just gravel and dirt, I mean, it's really not a huge undertaking. You know, it obviously will be more costly, but you're also doing it right and ensuring you get a good result out of it. Otherwise, you're going to end up repairing this thing in parts and pieces over time, which is more expensive, and you run a much higher risk when you do a line in parts and pieces to getting settling problems. That's just the nature of the beast. So, for instance, if, you know, down the road here, not too long, some of those joints start to cause settling problems, offset joints and things like that. Every time you bust into the ground, you make it more likely that anything you're leaving in the ground or trying to leave in the ground, you're gonna compromise it in some manner. So this is, to me, is an all or nothing thing. I've been doing this for 13 years. I've cambered 25,000 sewer lines, and that's often a result you end up with, unfortunately. Not always, but anyway, if you're going to go after this, just, you know, purely from a flow standpoint here, not looking at longevity and whatnot, you know, if you handle this joint here, that's going to take care of anything that's obstructing flow. Beyond that, you do have joints that are compromised. They are indeed open to the ground, or exposed to it anyway, not gaping wide open. So anyway, this is the stuff here. I'm gonna take my markings out to this point because, I mean, your line needs to do two things by and large. It's convey sewage from point A to point B, and it also needs to be watertight. And, you know, we don't have that at this joint out here at 12 feet, the one behind it. And then you've also got an offset. And that joint there, when you get an offset like that, especially an older concrete pipe where the joints don't seal up quite as nicely when you're meeting ABS up with very old sewer pipe, it would not surprise me one bit if that, where that offset is also partially open to the ground too. So, and if you're going to take it out to 12 feet here, I mean, you're already basically halfway down the line. So that's what I'm getting at. It just doesn't make a lot of sense here to do this by a spot repair. To me, it's kind of all or nothing. Alright, so someone's already put a bunch of markings down here. I don't know if it's the city, but the line's mapped out from the clean out all the way to the main connection. You'll see a little bit of differentiation. My green paint's a little bit different color, but I put a green X about halfway between the clean out and the connection to the main, or the street edge essentially. 2 foot 7 inches deep there at about 12 feet. And at the main connection, I was getting between 3 foot 9, 3 foot 10 inches. And I'll put a marking here right where the well, I've actually got to take it back. Basically right to the clean out. The standing water starts almost immediately after you enter into the line. Alright, that X marking is just not even quite a foot past the clean out there. So anyway, what I've done here is I've marked this out in the event you only do part of it. It would be going from X to X. So you've got an X right here in front of the clean out, and then you've got another one out there. It's about halfway to the street. You'll see another X marking. All the other lines in between here and there are someone else's markings, but I've double checked them. They're pretty on the money. My 2 cents on this, once again, is just to simply fully update it. You're going to end up with a better result. It's more cost effective to do it that way too. So if you're just trying to go after the offset joint there combo with the belly, as well as the joints that are compromised and allowing groundwater to seep in, you know, you're going to be going about 12 feet out here. But You know, by the time you get out to that point, you might as well just take it to the street. So after any repairs that are done, make sure a rescope is performed to check the work. It's very important to do that. If no repairs are done for some reason, as this line sits, it is a functioning sewer line. I don't do pass-fail. The line's functioning, but it is draining slower than it should, and it's at much higher risk for blocking because of that offset joint, and we already have evidence that it's caused a blockage there. So if you're living with it and not correcting it, make sure you're treating it nicely. Keep it to folded toilet paper. Don't put too much stuff down the line at once. No wipes, paper towels, grease, cooking oil, all that stuff. You want to try and keep it to very, you know, stuff that breaks down easily, and you don't want to get too much volume going down there at once. That's where that stuff's going to hang up on that offset potentially. So, and I would, if you're trying to get this thing down the road a little ways, I would probably rescope this line at about the 1 year mark. That's going to give you a baseline for how the line's handling your living habits. Right now, it's a fairly clean sewer line. There's not a lot in there. I don't know if the line was cleaned before the sale or not, but right now, you've got a fairly clean sewer line by and large. So right now, it doesn't need drain cleaning or anything like that. So that's ideal. That way, when you get a 9 months, year or so down the road and do a rescope, you know that essentially every bit of buildup that may be there is coming from you and not from a previous homeowner. But make sure you rescope the line after repairs are done. You want to do that rescope after the line is buried, not beforehand, or you're not going to catch any settling problems that may occur after the line's buried.